Fantastic. Thanks for joining us today and taking the time. This is going to be a fantastic session. So I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today for this session, this webinar on addressing racism and systematic barriers faced by Black people in Canada's tech sector. My name is Kathy Gibson. My pronouns are she, her. And I am the Senior Project Manager and Consultant with Technology and People Networks, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion portfolio of work. We're very pleased to have had the opportunity to run a large-scale provincial project here in British Columbia around in collaboration with the BC government, and are so pleased that we've pivoted that work into various partnerships and are able to share these sessions out with the community at large. So thank you for joining us here today. I have almost 20 years working in the space in the technology sector, and my background is as an HR person. I'm super passionate about equity, diversity, inclusion, and belonging, and the journeys of various employers and people working within the technology sector and how we can build a more inclusive ecosystem here in Canada and have a sense of belonging for all people in the workplace. I'm super excited to have just an incredible lineup of panelists here with us today. I'd like to start with a land acknowledgement. I respectfully acknowledge that the land that I work and play on is the unceded traditional territory of the Coast Salish people, including the traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations. I would encourage all of you to share the land that you are on. If you're welcome to do so in the chat, and I'm sharing a link that if you don't know the land that you are on, that you could look it up, and it's wonderful to have an awareness of the land that we are on. The Indigenous people of Canada have tremendous wisdom to share, and they are the original wisdom holders of this land and they offer so much fantastic teachings around how we can be in a good place with the land and with planet Earth. And I encourage us all to take a moment and just really acknowledge the land that we are on and give thanks for that. I'd love to jump into the agenda here. So today we're pleased to get started. We have unfortunately our partners with Lighthouse Labs weren't able to make it today, so I'm going to do a very brief introduction on their behalf, and then I'm going to be passing the session off to my esteemed colleague Pasima Sule, the CEO of the Black Women's Business Network, and she's going to be sharing with us some very fascinating research results around an ESDC study that they've been running, and TAP Network has been running in partnership and supporting as well. And we're very happy to have this partnership. Really always so excited to have my good friend and colleague Eunice Kajoba with us here today. Many of you may know Eunice. She's a fantastic facilitator and speaker and the founder of the Monachopoulos consulting firm, and she's just has a wonderful wealth of knowledge to share, and we'll be running a panel with some fantastic individuals with us here today, who you'll be introduced to shortly. We'll also have the opportunity to do some Q&A in today's session and acknowledge our sponsors. I would encourage you that if you have questions throughout the session, feel free to direct them to me, and then we can interplay with our beautiful panelists here today. And with that, I would like to just quickly acknowledge the partnership that we have with Lighthouse Labs and the Government of Canada. And so ultimately, labor shortages have given rise to a massive opportunity across Canada's tech sector. And we're just very, very pleased that the Government of Canada and ICT Boost has offered a funded initiative that aims to support the training and workforce entry and job retention to new diverse generation of tech talent very excited to have the support of ICT Boost to make these sessions like this possible. This initiative has been funded by ESDC, that is pioneering a more inclusive and prosperous tech sector for all. ICT Boost is dedicated to cultivating a robust ecosystem of opportunities for all. And we are very pleased to have this partnership, and I'll share a link for Lighthouse Labs in the chat. And with that, I'm going to pass the floor off to Pasima Sule. She's a fantastic entrepreneur and CEO of the Black Women's Business Network. She's been a longtime colleague, and she's founded this incredible organization, and she's just been an inspiration to work with. And so happy to have you here with us today. Pasima, if you'd like to introduce yourself. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kathy. Hello, everyone. I'm Pasima Sule. I'm a social impact entrepreneur, and I'm really thrilled to be here today. I'm joining you from the traditional ancestral territories of the Semiahmoo people and the Coast Salish people, which is today known as White Rock. And it's really a pleasure to be, and thank you, Lighthouse Lab, for making this webinar possible. And so my journey in the tech industry began about 20 years ago in the USA as a software engineer at a Chevron Oil and Gas. So I was writing code for oil and gas company. And over time, I transitioned to be an IT project manager in various countries that Chevron operated in. So I led global technology projects, from building data center, managing oil and gas data, across different industries. And so I had the privilege of working in the USA, in France, in London, and also in Africa, in Angola. That was very, very interesting. And about 6 years ago, my family and I will move to Canada. I was kind of looking for a blend between Europe and the United States. So I settled in Canada. So that's what brought me here 6 years ago. And when I came into Canada, I really wanted to have a social impact and also impact my community, and also give back from what I've learned all over the years, from all my global experiences. So that led me to establish the Black Women Business Network. And it is a professional organization that aims to support Black women professionals and entrepreneurs, and also the wider Black community. So we don't want to leave, the other genders behind. And so with that said, we are working on a project focused on increasing the representation of Blacks in the tech sector, since one of our key focus areas is really increasing the representation of Blacks in sectors where they are underrepresented. So in order for us to propose or co-create solutions to address this issue, we took a data-driven approach. So with that said, we initiated a research, and the research is again funded by ESDC, by their Workplace Opportunities programs, removing barriers to equity. And the goal of the research was to gain insights about the experiences of Black people in the sector, some of the barriers that they face. So our survey did not only limit itself to Black people. We engaged over 200 participants in the sector, and both Blacks and non-Blacks. And the whole idea was really, again, to find out what are the experiences in the tech sector. So if you can go on to the next slide, I'm going to be sharing some of the findings, that we got from our survey. So as you can see from the graph there, we had a diverse number of respondents: Black, non-Blacks, white, those that are citizens, permanent residents, and also temporary residents. What are they thinking? So we asked them the question, what is your perspective on the representation of Black professionals in the tech sector overall? Now, we see the underrepresentation, we observe it, right? But we didn't want to make an assumption. We wanted to get data to validate our assumptions. And as you can see from the responses, majority of, 80%, 81% of white non-Blacks have observed the underrepresentation. 67% of Blacks said, yes, there is underrepresentation. As you can see, the different categories of workers. So there is definitely a widespread acknowledgement of the underrepresentation in the sector. Again, we see that, and I'm sure, as HR professionals, you kind of observe that, but again, we wanted to be data-driven and really get the data to validate our assumption, right? Next slide, please. Eunice, next slide. Thank you.
It is, hold on.
Oh, the one before that, the one about leadership. Yes, thank you. That one. No, the next one.
Sorry, there is
Yeah.
a delay. Got it.
Sorry about that. Yeah. And then, we wanted to also delve deeper, right? It's not just looking at, okay, there's underrepresentation, but what about at the managerial level? What about at the C-suite level, the decision makers, the people that, influence the direction of companies, the people that really make change happen? Are Blacks represented in these categories of people? So again, we asked the question, what do you people think? And as you can see from the results, significant level of non-Blacks, whites do see the underrepresentation at the leadership and the senior management positions. And even, the Blacks also, again, validated our observations. But what was really intriguing to me, or insightful, was the responses from the entry-level respondents, as you can see from the graph in your right. Overwhelmingly, they do see the disparity. They do see the underrepresentation. Now, funny enough, when I was an entry-level person in the tech sector over 20 years ago, I did see that. I did see the disparity throughout my career. But I didn't reflect and think about it until I saw the data. I guess I made the data mind-heart connection when I saw the results of the survey. And that really led me to, again, remember what my colleagues and I, my fellow entry-level employees and also middle-level employees used to say in the corridors, in that, yeah, leadership is not for us. It's for a selected few. No matter how hard we work, we're never going to get there. We had those conversations. We laughed about it. We joked about it. And it was so interesting that whenever one of us was promoted to a leadership position, it was a celebration. It was a community celebration. We all celebrated, and we used to laugh in the hallways. Oh, did you see so and so? It's now the leader of this department. It's now this, and we're very happy. And when one of them lost their job for one reason or the other, or left the company, we mourned as a community because we knew that, very few of us, were able to get there. And if the few of us that were there left, then it could impact, our community. And again, another story of mine, I was able to get into the tech sector. I worked in Cisco systems even before joining Chevron because, again, of sponsorship from two ladies that were at the leadership level. So that is how important it is to have Black representation at that level. So these people, the entry-level respondents, they're seeing it. And one of the things that is going to create is it's going to create a mental model that may lead at some point in time, impact their motivation to pursue leadership opportunities, even within the organization, and also impact them leaving the companies at the long run. Yeah. So hopefully these insights will help, generate the motivation to address this issue. Next slide. Yeah, and then we also inquired about some of the barriers. What are the barriers that, in terms of retention, what are the barriers that people have faced, in terms of getting into the tech sector? And as you can see from the graph, there are shared challenges: lack of relevant experience in the sector, lack of educational requirements. I think that is common to everybody. If you don't have the experience, you don't have the degree, you're not going to get in. But if you notice from the graph, there are some key disparities that the Black community faces. Racial bias, I think, is 34.2%. The interview bias, 31.6%. And then limited networking opportunities, 43.4%. Because as we all know, sometimes to access these jobs, you need to be in the right milieu. You need to be in touch with the right people. You might go to an interview, but at the end of the day, if you don't know the job owner, if you don't network with the right people, you don't network with the decision makers, you're not going to get in. So these are some of the barriers that they pointed out. And again, this accentuates the urgency of addressing interview biases, and, just again, that cultural sensitivity during the hiring process. So again, these are just 3 questions out of the many questions that we explored. If you're interested in knowing more about some of the results or the perspective that we gather, please feel free to email me at pasima@blackwomencanada.org. I hope this you've enjoyed, you've had some key insights by looking at this. And I hope, and the key takeaway is, as HR professionals aiming to increase Black representation in your organizations, understanding these challenges and barriers in recruitment, retention, and leadership development, I believe it's going to enable you to develop those tactical, specific organizations, specific strategies that you need to address some of the specific challenges that you face in increasing diversity. So thank you for your attention. And at this time, I'm going to pass it on to Eunice, who is going to delve deeper into some of the findings of this data.
Thanks, Pasima. Hello, everyone. My name is Eunice. I think I'm seeing some faces in the chat being added that I know, but my name, for those of you who don't know you, my name is Eunice. My pronouns are they, them, and I am an equity, diversity, and inclusion consultant and founder of the consultancy Monocopsis Consulting. So I really specialize in working with organizations to help really look deeply at their equity, diversity, and inclusion strategies to ensure that they're being more inclusive within this space, and partnering with them, partnering with their employee groups in terms of creating a space that is more equitable, that is more inclusive to the people within it and within that culture. And so a big part of what I focus on, and what we'll even dive into talking a little bit about, is that aspect of intersectionality and looking at how that also connects to EDI and is core and at the foundation of this work, and really making sure that that this space and this is what we look at in terms of how we build EDI within organizations. So I'm currently residing on the land in the stolen territory of the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh peoples. And so in terms of what I'm going to be talking about, to add on to what Pasima said, is my background is predominantly within the HR space, within that business realm. And so I look at things in terms of looking at the full employee life cycle and looking at those aspects of where we can break that down into where inclusion and equity and diversity really ties into these core pieces that businesses look at within their organizations. And I think that really ties to what Pasima has seen and found within the research. In particular, I want to look at 2 aspects today. So I want to look at the aspects around the hiring process, and then as well as sort of looking more at promotions, growth, and development. So with the hiring process, Pasima mentioned in regards to the survey and research, the representation of Black professionals is low at all levels of the workforce, right? And so I will talk more about the highlighted underlying issues that I have listed on the slide, but I want to take a step back and talk more about the Black talent pipeline. Right? We often hear comments such as, there isn't enough qualified Black talent that exists for roles, right? But I think the better question to ask is, how much effort and time is your organization willing to put in to ensure that you're expanding your talent pools and making sure that when there are candidates in the pipeline, that they're being treated equitably in order to, in addition to other members that are within that pool as well. So when we talk about systemic issues, systemic racism, barriers, these issues are built into the processes of hiring and built into the ideologies that individuals have while hiring. And a lot of these issues are rooted in bias, they're rooted in stereotyping. So for example, there are many qualified Black individuals in the workforce who have immigrated here from other parts of the world. And there is this bias of downgrading international working experience that could be highly transferable to your organization. There is that bias and that skew towards North American or Western society experience, and a skew towards native English speakers, and having that bias as well. And so for reasons like this, Black folks and other folks of color that don't fit into this bucket get discounted from the hiring process or early, or they're discredited in their experiences, come in at lower levels, even if they are highly qualified to act in more senior positions or act within the roles that they're applying for. Another factor impacting is whether or not you have access to the network, as Pasima mentioned. And so there's this common recruitment term that we've often heard about, and it's that hidden job market, right? And that refers to how the majority of roles aren't actually posted. And it's really, really just about who you know. And historically, Black people have had less opportunities and access to internal working networks. And if these individuals have immigrated and come from elsewhere, it's even more challenging to build a network and gain access to these opportunities. There's less access to things like referrals, because the employees that are doing the referring are doing that within their own social networks, and people within your own network often tend to look more like you, or they tend to have more similar experiences to you. And that means that others are left out of these conversations and are left out of having these types of opportunities, right? And it's so interesting because some of you might be here and saying, oh, I might know this already, right? But Pasima just did this study. This research was just launched, which means we're still seeing these issues continuously persist, which means that we're not making the changes that need to be made in order to address them. And there's still a lot more work to be done in this space. And so when we look at that level of organizational accountability, right, the organization, so the onus is on organizations to ensure that they're establishing equitable practices, that are doing things to mitigate bias, to challenge and to push back on the desire to rush to hire, instead of building out thoughtful structures that source candidates from multiple avenues. Companies, they really need to start thinking more about the long term of creating opportunities to build networks, to build partnerships with key community groups, so that they don't have to ask the question that we have here of where is all the Black talent, because you'll actively have people within your pipeline already and have developed processes that aren't skewed towards eliminating Black talent based on systemic bias, racism, and those internal deeply rooted structures. However, I know we're starting with the hiring process, even because it is that beginning stage of the employee life cycle, but none of these pieces of bringing Black talent into organizations actually matter if companies aren't ready and able and willing to support, develop, and advocate for those within the companies, right? So this starts from what's happening within, and that's really what's going to bring me to the next slide and the next point that Pasima has mentioned around the growth, development, and the promotion of Black talent. So I have this real question listed at the top here. Where are all the Black people in leadership? And I can honestly say in my career, I've only seen one Black leader in any of the organizations that I've worked at in the VP level. And I've only ever had one, which apparently is rare in my experience, had one Black leader that was leading me at the director level. Weren't based in BC, they were based in Toronto. So even looking at people who exist within BC, rare. Looking at people at all across Canada, very, very rare. Yes, we'll see a few more in Toronto, but not, this survey is based on Alberta, is based on BC and predominantly, and we're not seeing Black leadership at those levels, right? And so it's why is that? Where is the Black leadership in Canada and other parts of the world? And so really, that is my entire experience of only seeing one VP once, of only working with one director once. And it's really just clearly emphasizing what's listed in this survey about Black leadership and there being, or lack thereof, within organizations. Essentially, when we look at this amplified, it also really extends to those pieces of the intersections of gender and other marginalized identities, right? So we're not seeing Black talent in leadership. We're not seeing it from that intersectional lens, especially, right? And when asking ourselves why that is, there are a lot of reasons that contribute to this, and to build on from what we've discussed about bias, and to build on from what we've discussed about systemic racism and why those things impacting us. So some of the key common examples that are listed here are around stereotypes. They're around microaggressions. There are often biases within organizations that are built around the qualities that make up a leader and how individuals are supported in their career development to move into higher leadership roles. So that's leading to those things like stereotyping, who should be a leader, what a leader looks like, and creating that gap. And so some common phenomena that exist as barriers to Black people moving into leadership positions include things like the glass cliff, right? And this is common with more marginalized genders. Specifically, there's a lot of reference in relation to women and Black women specifically, but the glass cliff is a phenomenon in when women in particular are put into positions of leadership at a time when an organization is in greater turmoil turmoil and struggling. And so essentially they're put into these positions during times when they're more likely to fail, so that if they do fail, there's this bias and this justification that they were not suited for the role to begin with, instead of thinking about and considering that maybe they were thrown into a situation that was already, struggling and the real challenge, and it wasn't the individual themselves. Another example that is very common is this word of tokenization, which is when individuals from historically excluded or marginalized groups are given the illusion of being included without there actually being made changes to the structures and the processes of an organization to be more inclusive, right? So hiring Black talent, not helping develop them, grow them, support them, really just kind of having them be that token piece there, right? And so essentially that's just being more on the performative lens of things. And so this extends to situations like in leadership, in which we get into the case of super tokenism, which some of you may not be as familiar with. And that is a term that has been used by Dory Tunstall to describe tokenism on a more extreme lens of being the first and the only person of a historically excluded background that has been brought into a leadership role due to their extremely sought after talent and their skills, but then they're not supported once in this role because of the systemic barriers and racism that exist within the organization that have not actually been addressed or dismantled. An example that I have listed here is with former Harvard president Claudine Gay, who resigned from her position after only 6 months due to being targeted by racism throughout her entire tenure, and a lack of support from her organization when allegations of her professional conduct and character were brought forward. And so what I think is really, really unfortunate about incidents like this are that it's often not a surprise to hear about by many Black people who are aware of the challenges navigating corporate and leadership roles. So when we look again at this part about the organizational accountability piece, the accountability of an organization that it takes in supporting, developing, and growing Black talent is critical to the movement into leadership roles and to the retainment of that talent once they are in those positions. So if the system is broken, then it doesn't matter, right? If Black talent makes it to these roles, because they won't stay, they won't feel supported, they won't be included. And that's why this stage is actually more important and critical than looking at recruitment first, so that there's actually a positive environment for Black professionals to want to be a part of and not cause them harm. So that sums up some of the deeper findings and pieces and challenges that organizations are facing, and some of the reasons that are underlying issues that are behind that with recruiting and with retaining Black talent. But now I want to move forward a little bit to move to our amazing panelists and members that are going to be joining us here for more of to continue this conversation and have a deeper chat about it. All right. Okay. So we have our facilitator panel here that I will be facilitating. We have Pasima Sule, as have already been introduced to, but we have 2 more amazing panelists who are joining us. That is Dr. Debbie Motiliwa and Nene Azu. And so I would love to give our panelist members the opportunity to briefly introduce themselves before we hop into our panel questions. So maybe go ahead first, Debbie, and then Nene.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. I ventured into the tech world. I wasn't specifically looking to go into tech. I was trying to solve the economic problem that was facing Black people, where I pretty much just realized that for the Black community to thrive, we needed to build wealth. And for us to build wealth, we needed to have successful businesses. And so I founded an organization called AfroHub. And AfroHub was pretty much just a marketplace for Black-owned businesses in the BC area. All of this was to make sure that the Black community in the long run, grew. Unfortunately, AfroHub closed down for conversations and reasons that I will talk about at some point during this conversation. But moving on from AfroHub, I ventured into product management, started working at Microsoft, and then from there, currently at AWS, where I am helping SMBs move to the cloud, again, from the perspective of helping these businesses grow so that they can help the economies and communities in which they thrive in.
Thank you, Debbie. I'll let Nene, if you'd like to introduce yourself as well.
Thanks, Eunice, and pleasure to meet all of you. My name is Nene Azu. I'm on the product team at Borealis AI. Borealis is RBC's AI research lab. And so we infuse AI into different business lines of RBC. Prior to that, my background is in commercial banking, and I was in across the board TD, Canadian Western Bank, before doing some work with early stage fintech. So that's some background to me. Aside from that, I have a lot of experience working in the social impact space. I work with Black Opportunity Fund to help adjudicate small business, Black-owned small businesses as well as nonprofits with grant funding. Additionally, I have done a lot of work with Black Boys Code in Vancouver, and most recently, I did hosted the first ever Black-led social at one of the world's largest AI research conferences, CBPR. And very similar to Debbie, my goal is to enhance and empower the Black community and make sure that our representation is captured in a lot of these budding industries. So great to be here and share perspective.
Thanks, Nene, and thank you everyone for those amazing introductions. So we do have some prepared questions for the panelist members, but again, if there's anyone in the audience that has additional questions that we can potentially see if we can squeeze in towards the end, feel free to post them in the chat, or you can actually message Kathy directly, and then we'll check in on those during the conversation. Okay. So our first question, it is around sort of tokenism, recruitment, the talent pool. And so maybe Nene, you can start with this one. And so from your experience and your observations within the tech sector, have you noticed instances of tokenism and where companies, you know, as we've mentioned, that's where companies include a limited number of individuals from historically excluded groups, primarily to create the appearance of diversity. And so if so, what do you believe these companies might be missing out on or losing by adhering to a tokenistic approach rather than fostering actual genuine inclusion within their organizations?
Yeah, that's a great question, Eunice. In my experience, honestly, I think the issue of tokenism within the tech sector is not uncommon. It does create some significant missteps for multiple reasons. Firstly, diversity isn't just a matter of optics or fulfilling quotas. It's not just a checkbox that you tick and like try to make yourself or your organization feel good. To be honest, I think it even has a lot of economic repercussions because you are missing out on a huge group of individuals, and research itself shows that Gen Z and millennials typically tend to purchase from organizations that prioritize diversity, not only from the perspective that it aligns more with that value base, but also from the perspective that you are able to be aligned with a broader segment of individuals who your organization might not be addressing or aware of their needs. And so when you take a tokenistic or tokenized perspective and it's about the pictures on a website or just showing that there is an appearance of individuals in the company, however, this doesn't really translate across the board and across levels. It is really a missed opportunity, and I think a lot of organizations stand to benefit both economically and culturally by actually embodying diversity and not just pretty much acting like it's actually at the ethos of what they value. So. Yeah.
Thanks, Nene. Yeah, you definitely bring up some really valuable points there, especially around like, hey, it ties into the internal perceptions and the internal support of employees, but also, yeah, externally, there are people who are looking for this, who are looking for truly, for organizations that are being more inclusive, that are actually being genuine in their approach to inclusion and to equity and diversity within their organizations, right? And that is something that is highly valued and sought after, not just to create a culture that's more positive in your company, but also to externally create people who connect and identify with your organization and your brand. I know we had chatted earlier and you had mentioned some pieces that were also really awesome about connecting sort of things like that to advocacy. And I was wondering if you could also speak a bit more to that too.
Yeah, so in my experience, I found that if you have individuals, and I think Pasima, you mentioned this as well, where you have people who are ahead who create openings and doors that enable your ability to bring in a refined approach or reimagine solutions to problems. It does take going a little bit beyond the norm. And in my experience, I've had some recruiters who have gone multiple steps to try and ensure that this is actually something that lands. And my organization, I think like my manager might be very happy to speak on how well I'm doing. However, if not for that research, that recruiter, who knows, maybe I wouldn't be here, right? And it took quite a bit to be able to get over the humps of some of these interviews and being able to understand the processes in which it takes to actually land roles and be able to communicate that back. And so I think sometimes not writing off individuals right off the hop and not looking at them as just, oh, is this person going to fill the perception of which we have of what an ideal candidate could be, because what an ideal candidate could be could come in multiple forms. So I think that there is a chance for us to really move the needle across the board in hiring practices, but also being advocates really goes a long way to solving some of the challenges we're facing.
Thanks, and thanks for those really, really critical pieces. And it's like that really ties into that intentional piece, that genuine piece, and actually creating that and fostering that space of an inclusive environment where everyone can kind of, really grow and build on their own unique skills. I just want to leave space at Pasima or Debbie if there's anything that you wanted to add on either advocacy or the point about tokenism.
Yeah, I think for me, it's really based on what Nene said, it's not just being an HR professional who is out there to increase the numbers of, of colored people in your organization. It's really been about an advocate, knowing that, I'm supporting my company to grow economically and also grow culturally, because what Nene said is that you're missing out on, a greater cultural experience as an organization. So being intentional and being an advocate for your organization is really key. So, I mean, my key takeaway is that, as an HR professional, don't just be that, be an advocate, an intentional advocate, for helping your organization strive economically and culturally.
Yeah. And just to add there, I think we are talking to HR professionals now, but from the HR professional standpoint, there's a role you play in engaging with hiring managers, because at the end of the day, a lot of times the decision is actually made by the hiring manager. So making sure that they understand that it's not just a quota that you're trying to fill, but when you're interviewing or you're talking to potential candidates, look beyond, oh, I see this particular race, so I want to fill a quota, to what is this person bringing to the table, and really think about it from that angle. That really helps you with picking the best candidate. And a lot of times the best candidate can be from any color, right? It can be from any race. But it helps you picking the best candidate and then bringing them in and accepting them because of their knowledge, because of their experience, and because of their expertise. And then even from the HR perspective, there's also the pay part, right? When there's that differences in pay, the pay that you would give someone else from a different color compared to what you offer to someone from the Black profession or Black community, that also could make a person think, I don't know, maybe I probably shouldn't take up this position. So just making sure that every single thing across the entire recruitment process, across the entire hiring process, is favorable to everyone and allowing people to accept and really be themselves throughout the entire process.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for adding that. And I think I'll keep you there, because I think the next question will kind of steer towards you. And so we have this question around retention and growth and advancement, right? And leadership development. And you were talking a bit about this, but the question is sort of what more? So how can companies address some of those systemic barriers related to retention, to growth and advancement of Black professionals in the tech sector after successful recruitment efforts into entry-level positions? And more specifically, what strategies can be implemented to enhance active participation in discussions to promote that career progression and ensure the long-term retention of Black professionals within these organizations?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Eunice. One thing I've started saying a lot when I have this conversation is hiring is amazing. Like, get us in. We're excited to be in. It's really amazing. But then why do we have a lot of situations? And I can count out of, let's say, 20 people in my close circle, I can count 10 or 15 of those people leaving a job that they were so excited and happy to be a part of and trying to find a completely different job, or even deciding, you know what, maybe this tech industry is not for me. And so hiring is so important, but the most important part is retention and growth. As human beings, we do not want to feel stagnant. We do not want to feel like we're in exactly the same space over a couple of years. We want to feel like we are heard. We want to feel like we're contributing to, you know, the things that we're working on. We want to feel like every contribution that we bring to the table is seen from a place of its merit and not being biased, or people are not having a biased view to it. I'll give myself for an example. I moved from an organization that was very heavy on PowerPoint presentations to an organization that was more heavy on written docs. Now, the reason I did that, there are a lot of reasons, but one of the key things that really played in my mind is when I'm giving a presentation, I'm a product manager, so that means I am selling an idea, I'm selling a feature, I'm selling what I have done a research and walked through. When I'm giving a presentation, there are a lot of barriers that a person listening to me is going to have to intentionally pass through. The first thing is I'm speaking to a table of mostly Caucasian men. So there's the fact that I am not a man, I am a woman. The second part is, oh, okay, you're a woman, great. I am a Black woman. Now the third part is I am a Black woman with an African accent. So there's like 3 different things. I'm not just selling my idea and the work that I have put into this to you. I have to sell myself. And the fact that a person has to go through all of these different stages for them to get to a point of listening to my idea is very complicated for me as an individual. It's stressful. I don't want to have to always go to conversations and think, oh, are they really hearing me? Do I need to speak slower? Do I need to change my tone? How can I make sure that, you know, I am received in the right way? And so I had to move to a place where, you know, I'm writing a doc and my doc has no voice. My doc has no gender. My doc has no race, and you're only able to read through all of that information. And based on that, now let's have a conversation. And what really has happened between these two is with a role where, you know, HR, hiring managers, employers are really listening to people, listening to their ideas and leaving out the color part, leaving out the differences part, leaving out their bias. Then you'd see that more Black professionals that get into the tech industry are actually able to stay because their ideas are being heard. They're actually able to grow because when it comes to promotion, everything that I have written, everything that I have worked on has been so well documented that it is easy for you to tell that I have been contributing to this team, I have been contributing to this organization. So really, I think that when we come to these challenges that we are facing as Black professionals, getting in is one good part, but creating a space where people can grow, creating a space where I don't feel like I am afraid to be vulnerable, creating a space where I feel like I can be myself is very important. And thinking about it from like a HR perspective, what does that mean? It means that, you know, there's transparent career development. Everybody knows what they need to do for them to grow within their career. So I, as a candidate, or I, as an employee, I know what I need to do. And there's a process for me to document all of that so that myself and my manager are on the same page at every given time. Now, in a situation where, you know, things happen and I feel like I am treated unfairly, or I feel like I'm not heard mostly because of my race or mostly because of where I'm coming from, let that be fair processes where I know that I would be listened to by the HR. I would not have to go the extra tooth and have to go through too much for me to actually get them to listen to my own opinion. And then beyond that, diversity and inclusion training. I know every organization does diversity and inclusion training these days, but I genuinely feel, coming from a place where I've taken a lot and every month, you know, you're sent a message, you need to take this new training, this training is due. I personally feel like diversity and inclusion training these days is just saying things like, oh, don't have some level of microaggression, listen to people's accents, or don't say certain things, don't call genders when you're not sure, don't call races when you're not sure. Those are great and nice, but I think diversity and inclusion training needs to go into diversity from a place of knowledge. My experience is completely different from your experience as my manager in my male Caucasian manager. And so when I bring in my own experience to a project, take a minute and listen to what I am saying. Take a minute to walk through the path that I am going. Take a minute to actually understand what I am saying, and before you make the next step or before you make a new direction. Right. So diversity and training, inclusion trainings these days, I think we really need to focus on diversity in thought, diversity in experience, diversity in how we communicate these things beyond microaggression, which has always been a thing in the past. So I feel like all of those things, and also, representation and leadership, that is very, very important. I want to be able to see someone that looks exactly like me in a leadership position. That would help me to know that, okay, there is something for me in this organization, and then I can keep growing, or I can keep contributing to get to that space.
Thank you, Debbie. So many good points. So many good points. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think even just the one thing, like to name one of the things that you said, right, about looking at individuals' unique experiences, looking at your experience of being Black, of being a woman, of having an accent, having an African accent, that is all tying into the realm of things like intersectionality, right? And how crucial and how critical and important that is when organizations look at their strategies and approaches to supporting individuals within their companies, right? And not all Black people are made the same. Not all individuals in any race, gender, orientation, whatever, have made the same. We're all unique individuals. And I think looking at that experience is so important. And like, I really appreciate you being vulnerable and even sharing those pieces around like the stress of when you go into those situations, right? Me as a Black non-binary queer individual, I have different pronouns, going into situations and knowing how people are going to react when I interact with them and have these conversations, that also comes into my own experiences and my journey and what I'm bringing to the table. And so I think it's really important how we look at these things more uniquely as well, and tie that into how we engage in these dialogues and how we really support the people in our companies. And before I move on to the next one, because that was really great and you highlighted so many points. I don't know if Pasima or Nene, if there's anything you wanted to add there before I switch to the next question.
I think for me, when Debbie was talking, I was thinking the burden of retention and the responsibility of retention. Who owns that? Because the HR, the hiring managers bring in the people. But when I'm thinking about, again, my own experience, that burden of retention, I think primarily is a direct supervisor of the employees, right? The direct supervisors and the manager after the direct supervisor. And I think now, HR's role would be, how do I train the direct supervisors? How do I equip them to support us retain this brilliant talent that we've brought in, right? And so that's really one thing that I got, that burden that really needs to be clearly delineated and communicated to the supervisors. And then one thing that really stood out, from what Debbie said, the microaggressions and all of that, they've all been on PowerPoints. We've read it all, checkbox. But again, there needs to be a mind shift, right? For these supervisors is really that mind shift training, that mental model transformation. This is talent. Don't just view them as, okay, I'm fulfilling my diversity. This is brilliant talent that is going to contribute to the growth of the organization, because at the end of the day, it's all about the bottom line, right? They're going to contribute to the bottom line, and they're also going to contribute to a rich cultural environment, which really promotes the growth of the organization, right? So I think that mental shift, that role, that burden of responsibility of retention needs to be clearly communicated, and accountability mechanisms need to be set in for that.
Thank you, Pasima. Yes, like I literally was gonna add on here that accountability piece. So critical. And the part that you just mentioned, right? You said, hey, it is great to learn about things like microaggressions, be aware of these pieces, but what are you taking away from this? What are you actually doing from this? Where is the accountability beyond this and beyond this like one-off piece of knowledge? And I think that piece that you said of the mindset shift of tying things back to, no, I didn't just read it. Like, how am I acting on this? And also that, how am I putting myself in the shoes of these individuals, and how am I actually stepping into that lens of understanding? I think that is so critical. And thank you for bringing up that accountability piece, because I actually think that piece sometimes is the one that gets lost the most. Like people are looking to check the box, not looking to continuously act, because it isn't just like a one-stop check and it's done. It has to continue. It has to be embedded. It has to be a complete, shift in perspective and approach. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Okay, I will move to the next question, and then we'll see, maybe we can take one or two from the audience if there's time.
We've got a couple if it makes sense. We can definitely weave them in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to leave one more for Nene, and then we'll see what the audience is, what's bubbling up for you all there in the audience. So Nene, so one question around Black tech leadership representation and development. So according to where is this? According to sort of the survey that we just had, there's this consensus that Black professionals are significantly underrepresented in tech, in leadership, in senior management positions. So what strategies do you think that companies can adopt proactively and purposely to cultivate Black tech leaders, especially considering the prevalent concentration of Black employees at the lower levels?
It's a great question. In my experience, I think, as we mentioned, the retention and sort of progression of Black talent is a challenge. I think one of the things that could be very influential in helping resolve this could be setting up some sort of leadership training and pretty much creating avenues where there is a mentorship opportunity where young Black talent can actually gain direct feedback, gain direct skill set calibration, and have an understanding of some of the broader overarching objectives that the organizations care about, and even in how to communicate certain pieces of information that are crucial at different avenues and then through different channels. I think if you're being able to put your talent through programs, or even internally taking some of the people that have been extremely successful and having them be mentored by Black talent, it creates some ripple effects that are very, very, it's hard to quantify, but being able to have that back and forth and that rapport definitely will be influential. That's one tactical piece. I know we're short of time, so I could go into more of this, but I want to be respectful.
Appreciate you sharing all that knowledge, Nene, and I think it is really valuable for organizations to take into account. There is so much more to do and so much that can be done, and it is not just like something that's going to be done overnight, right? It is this continuous process. When you talked about mentorship, it's not like it's going to create the leader overnight, right? It is a process too, and there's so much in this realm. But yes, conscious of time, I know Kathy, you mentioned there might be one or two questions. One on maybe we'll take the one on development that you said.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple questions that have come in, and I think when we talk about development and the sort of the notion around what does support and advocacy look like in terms of supporting individuals in developing their career. So like in terms of opening the doors, I know Eunice, you and I have talked about this quite a lot in terms of sort of giving individuals access to maybe meetings they wouldn't normally have access to, or giving them opportunities to shine and be seen in a different light, perhaps. Or maybe we could just, if the panelists have any example or two of what valuable support and advocacy looked like or felt like based on your experiences versus tokenism, that would be, I think, really valuable for the audience. I had a question that was bubbling up.
I wanted to quickly just add to my final points there so that the rest of the panelists have the time. But I think if you take a KPI-centric approach to this, where you actually force your organization to have, to set up actionable, quantifiable metrics that build up on the leadership pathway, right, across the corporate ladder, it creates an avenue where now you can actually measure impact and how this is actually being framed. And so if your goal is to ensure that multiple different groups across everyone across the organization is getting access to some of this training, and you say, okay, well, we want to see what the baseline is of our Black leaders in growing across the pipeline, then you end up not in a situation of tokenism, but actually supporting that growth across the board and being able to measure it instead of just saying it and then looking at your data, because what's not quantified cannot be measured. And so that's one approach that I wanted to put forth.
Didn't even, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I can add to that. What does valuable support look like? Again, going back to the direct supervisors, training them to have transparent and courageous conversations with your direct reports, right? I remember in my days, I used to have regularly scheduled one-on-one every 2 weeks with my supervisor. And I was really very open, honest. Pasima, how you feeling? Do you feel that we're giving you everything to succeed as an organization? Do you feel as if you're being marginalized in any way? Do you feel as if you have the equal opportunity? So our supervisors were trained to have those courageous conversations and also building that trust, because again, based on where we come from, we're not trained to open and share our feelings, right? Again, there's that cultural issue that, comes and, with the barriers that we face. So culturally, we're not trained to do that. So you need to pull that out from the employee. It will not come out like that. So being culturally sensitive and training again people to have that courageous, transparent conversations to bring out these issues that if they're not brought out, they might become too late. And before you know it, there's a resignation notice.
I know we're really running short on time. I'll add just one specific example. I had a manager that, in my experience, is probably one of my best managers ever. She would give me the opportunity to speak at larger meetings, right? She allowed me to own my work and allowed me to go to higher levels. So maybe beyond her own level, her bosses, she would let me go and have conversations with her bosses or her skip managers around areas that I felt really passionate about. And so just creating that space where your employees or your subordinates feel like they can share, you're pushing them up and pushing them to keep showing that they have great ideas is something that was really beneficial to me. And I think that's really what support and advocacy looks like, especially when you want the particular individual to grow.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Debbie. And I know we're at time, so we won't continue. I'm sorry that we weren't able to answer any of the additional questions around recruitment. One thing I would just say, like that aspect of expanding your network and supporting your talent that way is so important. I will say I saw Rotimi Odra and on the call, like he does a lot of work in the diversity and inclusion space for recruitment. I'm like, you could reach out, ask him some of your questions to get to support that way. But I'm gonna thank you so much to all of our panelist members for being here, for engaging in this dialogue and this conversation. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hand it back to Kathy, but we started a small little poll that's in the chat. And so about which area does your organization need the most support in, sort of supporting and developing and increasing representation of Black talent, if you want to do that quick little poll. But after, I will actually hand this back to Kathy to continue this and wrap us up.
Amazing. I can't thank our panelists, Nene, Pasima, Debbie, Eunice, thank you so much. Just so grateful to have had your perspectives and your knowledge and just your expertise on this subject and to share so candidly and honestly. Thank you. The session today, addressing racism and system barriers faced by Black people in Canada's tech sector, was brought to us by ICT Boost Initiative, funded by the Government of Canada's Sectoral Workforce Solutions Program in partnership with Lighthouse Labs. Very, very grateful to our partners in having that. And just again, so grateful to having everyone here today. And I wanted to thank our diversity dashboard sponsors. I'll be sure to share a link out about the diversity dashboard in the follow-up email as well. But the diversity dashboard gives us insights into what is happening in the sector around key diversity points and of reference and representation. So glad to have had the support of Innovate BC, Sun Life, and Invest Vancouver on that. And then our sustainability community partners, UBC Saunders School of Business, Northeastern University here in Vancouver, Viatech, SOFO, Sierra Wireless, and Focus Professional Services, who focuses on ASD and autism spectrum disorder. Very grateful for all of our supporters. We will follow up with a shared email and seeing the poll results come in here, and looks like all of the above is the winner. I'm just going to share the results here, and feel free to take a bit of a look at that. But as you can see, we have some work to do. So recruitment and sourcing came in at 32%, and leadership development and retention was identified as well. But most people said, more than half of the audience felt like recruitment and sourcing, retention, and leadership development are all important things. So we can see that there's a lot of work to do here, and just grateful to have everyone's participation in today's session. We're very excited. We're going to be launching some training in April in partnership with Black Women's Business Network based on this research, and Eunice will be leading that wonderful training, and we look forward to opening that up to the tech sector to participate in a deeper dive around what we can do in this space and to make tactical improvements and to really look at retention. Thank you so much for everyone's participation today. I'm very grateful for you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.